Record Store Day Black Friday is coming up on November 25th, and I know that Record Store Day is quite hated by a lot of record fans, and a lot of people don't find it worthwhile anymore. But for the second straight Black Friday, we've actually got quite a large quantity of jazz releases that are going to be coming out. Some have been long out of print, some are really expensive, some are complete cash grabs. But I mean, I think there's enough that jazz fans can get excited about, and maybe even want to make the trip out to record stores on that Friday. So I have pretty extensively researched all through the list, found the jazz titles and jazz adjacent titles, some information like mastering engineers, pressing plants, source is not explicitly available. I have had to guess in some places, and some information might not be available until after these have been released, but I've done the best I can and I'm going to give you the information I have. If there's anything else you know that I have not included, please let me know down below. I think it's great that we can all kind of learn and kind of figure out some of this stuff together. As well, if there are albums or songs that are available on Spotify or on YouTube that you can listen to ahead of time to maybe make a judgment for yourself whether or not you like the music, you think it might sound good on vinyl, I'll leave those for you to check out as well. So without further ado, let's get into the list. The first title is Live 1978 by Mose, Allison. This is a RSD first title and is limited to 2,000 copies. So of course, RSD first means that the first edition of this record will be coming out on that record store day, and then a larger release will follow in the months or years to come. Oftentimes, RSD first releases end up being on a limited edition color, or there's something that makes them a little bit different than usually a standard black version that comes out later on. So this is on the Liberation Hall label, who do a lot of heritage artists. Generally speaking, they find decent sources. Most of their titles do sound pretty good. They don't necessarily press at the best plants, but their records are fairly cheap in comparison to other record store day titles. One that they released last year that was a bit of a head scratcher was Chet Baker's Albert's House, which is not a great album, and I think a lot of people were disappointed when they bought it. But if you read the reviews of a lot of their other stuff, the sound quality is usually pretty good. I know that there wasn't a lot of output from Mose Allison during this period of his life, and there's not any real information about how this concert sounds. The only thing that I can really comment on is that in the description they call it a well-recorded live set, so take that for what you want. I've been burned many times by soundboard recordings, great sounding. But if you're a fan, I think that this would be a great title to pick up. Next, we have Cheek to Cheek Live, Tony Bennett and Lady Gaga. This is a 2-record set and is a record store day first. So this was a DVD that was released, I believe, in 2014. What's really cool about this is that Tony Bennett was like 88 or 89 years old, and his voice is still fantastic. You can find the entire live set online if you want to listen to it. Definitely not my cup of tea, but fantastic vocal jazz. Both artists sound great. Definitely not the biggest fan of pressing stuff that was recorded as a DVD onto vinyl. I don't think it's completely necessary, but should be a good listen. Vinyl might actually make it sound better, but yeah, just pick up the DVD if you really want the music. Next, we have one that I'm really excited about. This is A Point of View by Bobby Cole. This is a 2-record set. It is a record store day first, limited to 1,300 copies. So if you don't know who Bobby Cole is, he was a piano player and singer that was quite popular around New York, but didn't really get a lot of recognition outside of that area. He was the piano player at Frank Sinatra's bar. He later on was the musical director for Judy Garland, and he had some differences with music labels where he didn't want to compromise kind of his artistic vision, and he ended up being a pretty obscure artist because of that. But listening to this now, holy crap, the dude is a star. Unbelievable voice, unbelievable songs, fantastic songwriter. Love that we get to see kind of these hidden gems get reissued. Originals of this record go for hundreds of dollars on Discogs. I think this is one that if you're a fan of particularly male vocal jazz, you should be getting. Next is Larry Coryell's self-titled album, Coryell. This is being put out as a record store day exclusive, 2,000 copies, and is going to be on crystal clear rose colored vinyl. So it's Kind of cool. I quite like Larry Coryell, fantastic jazz fusion guitar player, more leaning on the rock side of things than jazz. But we're starting to see a lot of his catalog's been reissued for record store days and record store day Black Fridays. Most of his titles aren't particularly expensive, but most haven't been in print for 35, 40 years. I think it's really cool that they're getting these sort of deluxe treatment. This has like Obi strip, the packaging's kind of beefed up a little bit. The album itself is, I guess you could technically call it jazz, but it sounds more like, you know, Santana than Miles Davis, you know, from like the late 60s, early 70s. I think it's a really cool album, particularly if you're like a classic rock guitar fan. This might be something that you really dig. But yeah, cool artist, different album. I think it's really neat, kind of psychedelic jazz fusion rock album. So next we have Reunion by Paquito de Rivera and Arturo Sandoval. It is a record store day first title, limited to 1,000 copies. So this is a really interesting album. It's two guys that both left Cuba and then eventually reunited in Germany in the early 90s and recorded an album together. It only received one vinyl pressing and it was in 1991. So well out of print, very rare, very cool album, Latin flavor swinging, awesome performances. The two guys are incredibly tight. This is a really interesting album. My only complaint is that kind of the early 90s production does sound a little bit flat at times, but wow, really high energy, great performance record. Next, we have two different releases by Ahmad Jamal. Emerald City Nights live at the Penthouse 1963 to 1964 and 1965 to 1966. These are both record store day exclusives, limited to 3,000 copies. So this is kind of interesting. So this is a new venture by Zev Feldman, who goes by the name The Jazz Detective. He's done a ton of work with different reissue labels. One thing that he did fairly recently was he produced the John Coltrane Live in Seattle LP that was released last year, where the record itself, there were pretty mixed reviews as far as, you know, sound quality, whatever, but completely historic piece, and packaging was stunning. I think that was actually my first YouTube videos. I unboxed that video, so I'll link that if you want to check that out. But as this is a new venture of his that he's releasing under the name Deep Digs / The Jazz Detective, I have a feeling that this is going to be a good release because he does not want to ruin, you know, reputation by putting out something kind of crummy. The description notes that it is audio transfer from the original tape reels and mastered by Bernie Grundman. So if Bernie's involved, probably going to be good. I also understand that maybe the transfer wasn't necessarily because they wanted to add a digital step or that the tapes were in bad condition, but it might be just because it's a compilation where each side of the record appears to be taken from a different set. So, I mean, obviously levels are going to be different, so that might be why it was transfers, but this one could be a total gem and one of the must-haves from this record store day Black Friday. Next we have Etta James. Etta is Better Than Evvah, a record store day exclusive limited to 2,500 copies. This is kind of an interesting title. It's from 1976. It's Etta James doing just straight up funk music. It hasn't been reissued in over 40 years. It was her last record for Chess Records. I'm listening to this digitally. There's even a lot of distortion on her vocals because it's just too powerful. If this comes out that this is a AAA reissue, I would say that this is a must-have. Funk music from this era is generally fantastic when it's reissued. But I don't know, this could just be a cash grab, which would be a little disappointing. But I'm gonna keep an eye out and see what other information comes out about it and see if it's worth picking up. Next, we have Other Worlds by Joe Lovano and Dave Douglas Soundprints. This is a 2-record set. This is a record store day limited run / regional focus title. Through all my research, I could not find what region this is going to be released in, so don't get your hopes up that you're going to be able to go to a store and find this on record store day. You might have to dig a little bit, but kind of a cosmic jazz record. You can definitely hear like the Ornette Coleman, the Sun Ra influences. It's fully available on YouTube. These guys have released a few records together. They did one on Blue Note, I believe. If you're into kind of that more obscure, kind of out there stuff, it's not too free jazz. It is still fairly accessible. But yeah, really cool artwork too. An interesting release. Next, we have Mingus by Charles Mingus. This is a record store day first limited to 3,500 copies. So this is kind of a continuation on the Candid reissue series that's been going on. So earlier this year, I think there was 5 different titles that were reissued by Candid. They were pressed to 180 gram vinyl, and they were all cut from the original analog tapes by Bernie Grundman. I don't have any of them, but I've heard really good reviews about them. I've heard that they sound pretty close to the originals. I'm looking forward to picking up some of these in the future, and if I go to the record store day this year, I think this is definitely one I'm going to be trying to pick up. As this is a record store day first title, they are doing it to opaque turquoise vinyl. What's interesting is when they did the series of these for the last Candid reissue series, they actually did a Vinyl Me Please exclusive of the Mingus album that they did for the last series, and it was also on an opaque turquoise vinyl, and it was pressed at independent record pressing, where the main series that was on black vinyl was pressed at GZ. So I think people were more impressed and thought that it was a better sounding record. So for this one, possibly pressed at independent, not sure. We'll have to wait and find out, but great series, usually a great value. They were all retailing for about 28 Canadian bucks, so quite a value. I'd say they're probably going to be 32 to 35 Canadian for this record store day. But yeah, very, very good series. Looking forward to what else they're going to be putting out, because it appears that they're going to be doing another set of these. There's probably going to be a few more titles down the road, including the Classic Quartet by Thelonious Monk. Another one. This is a record store day first. Few less copies though, only 3,000. This is a great set. It's been reissued a few times over the years under different names. I've seen it called Thelonious Monk 1963 in Japan, Tokyo 1963. It was released on CD in 2005 by Candid with this same cover and track listing. It's a wonderful set. I would recommend listening to it. His rendition of Just a Gigolo and Blue Monk are awesome. The only thing that's different about this one versus the other Candid series is that it does not specify that it is cut from the original analog tapes, possibly because this set was actually taken as part of a live broadcast from Japan, so maybe a tape never really existed. Maybe there's only copies, transfers. I wish that they'd be a little more transparent, but they have deliberately excluded that was from the analog tapes. I still would expect this to sound great. Bernie's involved, so it's probably a great release. Love Thelonious. I think that this is one that you should probably pick up if you're a hardcore jazz collector. Next, we have Truth, Liberty, and Soul live in New York City, the complete 1982 NPR Jazz Alive recording by Jaco Pastorius. 3 LP set, record store day exclusive, limited to 2,000 copies. So I'll just say this full album is available on Spotify. I went to listen to it, and oh my god, is it spectacular. Even listening on like my crappy headphones through my laptop, the recording is stunning. It has been noted that this has been culled from the original 24-track tape read. It's the complete concert from start to finish, with the sound meticulously restored and mastered by the original Grammy-winning recording engineer from the broadcast, Paul Blakemore, and the record has been mastered by Kevin Gray at Coherent Audio. So obviously, I think this record is going to sound spectacular. I think it's going to probably be pretty expensive as it is a 3 LP set. But with that though, you're getting inserts, liner notes, deluxe photos. I think this is going to be a really interesting package, but at the very least, just listen to a few songs from this. You'll be blown away, and expect to hear really, really good things about the vinyl once it's released. Next, we have On a Clear Day live in Zurich 1971 by the Oscar Peterson Trio. This is a record store day first, 2-record set, 1,800 copies. So this is following last record store day Black Friday when it was put out. It was Oscar Peterson Quartet live in Helsinki 1987. That was a 3 LP set, pressed at RTI on, I believe it was blue vinyl. It was quite expensive, but I heard fantastic reviews about it. So I was really excited when I heard that they were going to be seemingly continuing this series. The covers are very similar between the 2 records. This one is going to be on clear vinyl. It's from his MPS era, where I think that a lot of those albums are really good. I do like him in a trio quite a bit. My only comment would be that there's been 1 song released from this digitally on Spotify. I found that when he's hitting higher notes, it's really starting to hurt my ears. It is so loud. I don't know how that's going to translate to vinyl, if it's going to be cut in a way that it sounds great and it's like a very forward, very punchy pressing, or if it's just going to be kind of annoying. Also, another thing I noticed is I kept kind of pausing the music because I thought something was happening around me, or I left a tab on my computer open, but there appears to be like significant audience chatter, side stage chatter in the recording that I found a little bit distracting. Again, maybe once you play this on your hi-fi, it puts you more in the room and it gives you more of a surrounding, but I'm gonna wait and see what people say about this one before I'd be going to grab it. Next, we have one that, jazz, maybe, but it's Opera by Iggy Pop. The record store day exclusive, limited to 4,000 copies. So if you haven't been following Iggy Pop's career, the last 15 years, he has done whatever the hell he wanted. He put out 2 albums, mostly in French, and this is one of them. It was Opera. His record label straight out was like, no, we're not releasing that. He ended up putting it out on an independent label, and it received 1 vinyl pressing in France in 2012. But Iggy's had quite a bit of a career, kind of renaissance, since he did his collaboration album with Josh Homme in 2015, 2016. But there's been kind of a renewed interest in this album, and it's basically Iggy singing a lot of standards, covers, in both French and English, in kind of this jazzy lounge singer style, which he has a very gravelly voice now. Kind of fits him. It's actually pretty good. A little weird, but album's not available on Spotify anymore. You can listen to it on YouTube, get a flavor for it. Some of it's quite jazzy. He does like Serge Gainsbourg, Yoko Ono. He does an awesome cover of the Beatles' Michelle. I'm probably gonna buy it, I'll be honest. Also, it's going to have an obi strip, gatefold, printed inner sleeves, original record labels on solid pink vinyl. Very cool, and it has a new album cover versus the original. Next, we have African Culture by Shabaka. This will be put out on Impulse, record store day exclusive, 2,500 copies. So you might know Shabaka Hutchings. He's in Sons of Kemet. Comet is Coming, incredibly talented young jazz musician. This was his debut solo record put out earlier this year. Did not receive a vinyl release. So I guess it's gonna be, this might be the only time you're able to get it. It's gonna be on maroon colored vinyl. The music itself, very meditative, ambient, lots of chimes, lots of flutes, very, very laid back, relaxing record. Kind of interesting, I'd recommend it. And lastly, we have the Jazz Dispensary Haunted High. This will be a record store day exclusive, 3,600 copies. If you don't know the Jazz Dispensary, it's kind of this umbrella label that does reissues from Prestige, Milestone Fantasy, stuff from when jazz artists were playing, stuff that was more funk than hard bop. And every record store day, they seem to put out these compilation albums. This one is going to be on pink splatter vinyl, features tracks by the Cannonball Adderley Quartet, McCoy Tyner, Cal Tjader. Pretty cool stuff. I'd recommend these if you're kind of curious about this era of jazz. So that is it. Is there anything that you're interested in picking up? Is there anything I missed? Let me know down below. Thanks for watching.